You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. It is Wednesday, April 13th, 2022, episode 97. I'm joined with my co-host, Kristina Dennis. How you doing, Kristina?
I am doing wonderful for Wednesday. How are you doing, Damon Frank?
You know what? It is not bad for a Wednesday, right? It is not bad at all. Wednesdays are usually very busy for me. I don't know about you. So I usually wake up with a little anxiety. I'm going to be honest, little bit of anxiety on Wednesdays because it's like, oh man, the week is halfway through and I got to get everything done.
Right. We talked about it. We talked about it,
Yeah.
I don't know, last Wednesday or last Wednesday you were not well, but the Wednesday before that we talked about how it's the furthest day from the weekend. And that's why they call it hump day, that more fights break out on Wednesdays than any other day. I'm not sure if that's true, but I heard it. And I think it rings true for a little logic.
You shocked me when you gave me that stat. I was like, really? But I could see it because this leads into the topic that we've got. We've got a really great show for everybody. So hang tight. We've got two really great segments coming up. And I'm sure they're going to hit home. They hit home with me. I even had a little anxiety about, oh my God, we're going to talk about perfectionism.
Yes.
Perfectionism.
Do you feel a little called out? Before we do that, though, I want to make sure that I tell everybody this show is being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors and you. Please keep sharing, liking, following, and leave us a comment so we can bring interesting topics to the show. Also, visit info.recoveredlife.us. You can join the network, and there's a space there, a place that you can make a donation, which helps us to continue to help others. The link again is info.recoveredlife.us.
Oh, so important, Kristina. Thank you so much. It is people just like you that are listening right now on the podcast. You're listening live or you're in the Recovered Life Network and you're watching the content, getting a lot out of it. Just throwing a couple bucks into the donation can really helps us out a lot. It helps us bring this information to people who really, really need it. So thank you very much. Great topic today, perfectionism and shame.
Yes.
Perfectionism and shame.
Toxic shame.
This, Kristina. Toxic shame. Toxic shame.
Yes.
It's not just shame. It's toxic shame. So why are we talking about this today, Kristina?
Well, I think it's prevalent, if not almost 100%, that most addicts are perfectionists, underneath it all. And it may seem contrary to some of the things that we do, but it's one of the reasons why we have to break free and why we found the substance that'll, took us away from life. Perfectionism is born out of toxic shame. And I think that's really important to remember. A lot of us joke about it. I'm a little perfectionist, but true perfectionism is really, really a losing battle for anyone. I was reading recently, and we've talked about her book, but it's so profound how she discusses it. And that's Dr. Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. And she does a whole section on toxic shame and perfectionism. And what struck me, because I've kind of come at it, we've had people on the show that talk about perfectionism. What struck me was how truly dangerous it is. Statistically, research shows us that perfectionism actually hinders us from mastery. It actually hinders us from getting to our goal. And I thought, oh my God, I want to shout that from the rooftop so that people realize it's not healthy striving. There's a major difference.
You're right. And, and the thing is with perfectionism that's interesting is there's almost like a mental health component where you cross the line and it becomes OCD, right? Like for me, I know it's like, because I'm somebody who likes things, I like to get it right.
Right.
I want to get it right. I'm going to be honest. Even this morning, I said to you, because I was a couple minutes late, I had a week of not feeling well, and now I'm back and I feel like I should get everything that I missed over that week done in an hour and a half.
Totally.
And the reality, it's not based in reality. and I'm already doing great output, right? Like we were talking about that yesterday.
Yes.
So I get, you can become OCD about it and I know for me, it's just like, well, I just don't want to do anything then. I get stuck in inaction,
Mhm.
which is killer for people that are in addiction.
Totally. And Damon, you are 100% right about it being a mental health issue. It is not only detrimental and devastating, it's also, according to Atlas of the Heart, addictive, because it's
Yes.
detrimental because it's impossible, right? But when we fail, which we will inevitably fail, our reasoning isn't this goal is unrealistic. Our reasoning is, oh, I wasn't perfect enough. And so we
Yes.
double down on this perfectionism. And it is, I think, something that needs to be discussed from childhood on, because I'll tell you, the way that it was described in the book and my own experience was, that you were raised in a situation where the only thing that gave you the attention of a caregiver was when you achieved. And knowing what we know about dopamine, knowing that it's fleeting, it doesn't last.
Yes.
You can see how you honestly got there.
Well, I think, the interesting thing is it's definitely a brain pattern. I
Mhm.
know that in Recovered Life Discussions, we had a great discussion and we're going to play that here on the podcast, in an upcoming episode because it was so good. And people are talking about how they feel just trapped in this, almost like
Mhm.
an OCD thing. Now, let's talk about the shame in this because I didn't get this at first, but the more that people talked about the shame associated with perfectionism. Let's dive into that a little bit because people might be a little bit confused. I know I was when I
Sure.
heard the Brene Brown stuff. It's like, how does this tie in? How does the
Right.
shame tie in?
Well, first let's back up and explain about shame. And she started her career 20 years ago on this. And do you know when she decided that this is what she wanted to research, she was literally told by people that's a career killer. All right. And one of the reasons why shame can hide, and we don't talk about it, is because we can feel shame from talking about
Hmm.
shame. We can feel shame from actually just saying the word. And shame is different than guilt. Shame means that we are bad. So it's not about an outward uh,
Yes.
behavior. It's about who we are. Whereas guilt, which is healthy, and actually can be, dotted line to improvement, which is, I feel bad about what I did. Shame actually keeps us small. We keep it a secret. We don't talk about it. And so the shame that drives us, like we are bad, can go right into perfectionism because
Yeah.
we decide that somehow if we are perfect, then we don't get to carry our shame. But what we know about the elusive perfect is that right underneath it is that shame, because we could just add more shame to it. I wasn't perfect, so I am bad. I am a bad
Yeah.
person.
Well,
Inflate.
I think that's the thing because you've got to I have seen this a lot in the practice of 12 steps and I shared about this yesterday that what happens a lot I think is that we come in, we realize it's like after a while you sober up, you realize, wow, there's a lot of
Mhm,
wreckage here. There's a lot of stuff. I have to fix it. And then the 12 steps has a great thing. And therapy has something similar. And, other groups have something where you're going to make an amends. You're going to write it all down. Right. And then you're
mhm.
going to make an amends and you're going to clean it up. And I think a lot of people get out of that the interpretation of that, okay, I should have then let go of what has happened.
Right.
And what happens is that it wasn't really about the other person.
No.
It's not about what they did. It's remorse or guilt, which is,
Mhm.
could be good things. Maybe there are
Yes.
things that you feel remorseful or guilty about. And then you feel that through the process of fixing those, you should feel better. Right,
Right.
Kristina? But the
Right.
fact of the matter is you're still haunted. And that's really has to do with shame. It's the idea of who you think you are.
Mhm.
It has nothing to do with guilt
Yes.
or regret.
Yes, yes, and I'm so glad that you brought it up. John Bradshaw, who wrote and started the discussion about shame, talks about 12-step groups a lot. He is in recovery. He shared about it. And he talks about how we address shame. But I have seen that time and time again where somebody has come in and done the work, and then they don't understand why they still feel bad. And our step 5, 6, and 7 totally counteract that, totally talk about, the things that are happening in our lives and our flaws or perceived flaws and what we can do about them. I think that has been one of the cornerstones of my recovery for sure. And John Bradshaw is renowned, Dr. Bradshaw, for his work in this area.
Well, why this is so important is because toxic shame will then take people out, even though seemingly they've done the work, right? Like you
Yes.
look and they were honest and they did everything that they could do, and they're not living the same life that they lived before. They're not repeating the stuff.
Right.
So it's not like they're repeating patterns. They're not around the same people. They've really in all appearances not moved on, right? And are doing
Right.
the right thing. But the thing is, yet they still are carrying everything. I know I had a couple things that I had toxic shame about, and I think I still do, right? There are certain things that pop up later in your recovery. You're like, you know what? This is like an old issue that I dealt with 30 years ago. Like, I don't need to be carrying this around with me.
So true. I love that you share that, because shame is universal, which is why we have to have these kinds of conversations. Everybody has, and it's a primitive emotion, which means often we can't, until we do the work, excavate the belief system that's around it. And I guarantee anybody who's in recovery has a dose of shame that is fueling them. It's why I drank, because of the shame. And then why, when we move into recovery, relief doesn't necessarily show up immediately. Or like you were saying, it comes back. And then you're like, I thought I handled it. And then we have shame about our shame.
Well, I think also too, that there's a little bit of unrealistic hocus pocus that goes on with a lot of people in recovery, and we see this just in coaching, because they might have said, you know what? Wow, I did something to my family that wasn't great. I've addressed it. I'm sober. I've made amends for it. And I'm now moving on.
Right.
Right. But yet other people haven't moved on. Right. And they believe, and they believe that it's like, well, I've dealt with it. Okay. Well,
Yes.
it's over. It's
Right.
over. I've dealt with it. And that the world's just going to move on and everything's going to move on. No, like if you have a low credit score, like when you go buy a car, they have not moved on.
No,
like, you're still have a low credit score, right? So it's like dealing with these one by one. And, one of the things that I like about recovery is one of the huge principles is time fixes things. If you could just stay sober during that period of time, many things will be fixed. Many things will just be fixed on their own, primarily just because you're sober.
Right, because you are inward focused. See, shame is outward focused. Perfectionism is outward focused. We are depending on somebody else's opinion. We are also depending on our perception of somebody else's opinion. And what recovery teaches us is to look inward. And that's the only way we can truly make changes. We have to be able to go through the muck, figure out the birthplace of it. That I'm a big proponent of ACOA. I love the work that's done in ACOA, and it helped me to move out of that, belief that there was something completely wrong with me. And I was never going to be able to do it. It helped me divorce that story. And I think that people in recovery, that first couple of years, you're able to kind of deal with the here and now, and then something will show up, and you have to, I personally think you have to do that work to stay. You have to do that work to have a life,
Yes, you do. And the thing is that I think if anybody's listening to this, they're like going, well, how do I know if I'm caught up in this? How do I know if I have the perfectionism and shame link, right?
Yes.
What are the signs? What would you say that the signs are when you see someone maybe that you're working with? You're like, ooh, man, you've got that deadly combination of perfectionism and shame.
Right. Well, the signs are an unwillingness to talk about it. Keeping it a secret is paramount. An unwillingness to receive empathy, anger, Anger, hidden anger is also a really big sign of it. Not wanting to stop long enough to have the feelings catch up with them, refusing to believe that it even affected them is probably one of the biggest signs. I'm done. I've dealt with it. It's over. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think that it's always over. And then as we continue to recover, new things can show up that will reactivate our shame, even if they are seemingly so far apart. You know this by watching it, the people that have been over successful, I don't know if that's the right word, overachieving, and they're just exhausted and they can't figure out why every time they obtain a new goal, they don't get any joy out of it. And it's simply because they need to continue to keep running so that it doesn't catch up with them.
Well, I think, one of the things that we know about shame, and, we talk about Hawkins' book, Letting Go, a lot. And that's such a great book because he breaks down the energetic level and the bottom level, the worst level beyond anger, hate, violence, everything. The worst energetic level that you could be at is shame.
Yes.
And he talks about himself being an alcoholic and coming in and being trapped in shame, and that it's a shame spiral, and that it's like a tide pool. You can't get out of it, right? It's like a rip
Yes.
tide. The more and more you swim against the shame, the more and more you get sucked into it. And this is confusing for people because they just feel helpless. I know I have with certain things with shame. For me, and we're going to dive into this in the next segment about how Kristina, we're going to get real about our issues with perfectionism, right? But I think the big thing with this that I took away from this Brene Brown thing is that a lot of it is the questions you ask. One of the big game changers for me has been in recovery is I stopped asking the same questions. I stopped asking primer questions to suck me into shame, guilt, fear, remorse, right? And what are those questions? What's wrong with me? I hear that all the time, and what happens is you get the answer back. The universe says, hey, Damon, let me tell you what's wrong with you. This, right?
Right. And I'm so glad that you brought that part up because as I've said before, secrecy is one of the things that shame has to have in order for it to continue. And what happens with perfectionism is we quit being curious. And what we know about mastery, which is I think the level that all of us want to be, is that it's actually dependent on being curious and asking those questions, asking yourself those questions. And when you ask what's wrong with me, it's important to understand that the answer is a bunch of things and nothing at all, because this is a human experience.
But
Everyone
Kristina,
has shame.
it never comes back and nothing at all. Maybe it will come back at nothing at all 3 hours later, but it usually comes back with, well, let me tell you, you didn't do this right. You didn't do this right. You don't look a certain way. You don't have a certain car. You don't have it right. It'll suck you into the people, places, and things, and you're trapped. And one of the biggest changes in my life is I started to ask different questions. When I get into this, I start to say, what's trying to emerge here? And what happened is I started getting back different questions. And one of the questions regarding perfectionism that came back is it says, what's trying to emerge here is you're not perfect.
Right.
And it was like, you're right. I'm not perfect.
Right.
And that's okay. And that's okay.
And nobody can be perfect.
Yeah.
It's unattainable.
See, for me, I don't care if nobody's perfect. I still should have been perfect. Right. Like, see, for me, I'm one of those people. It's just like, well, that's not that. Let's not set the bar on other people because other people could be very disappointing. I should be perfect, even though they're not. Right.
Right. Well, my father used to say, we're not perfect, but we're closer than most. Now,
exactly.
My father died an alcoholic death, so I can see how dangerous it is firsthand. One of the ways that shame goes away is empathy. But we need self-compassion. We need self-compassion, even if it's just for 5 minutes to pick up the phone and reach out to somebody and say, this is what I'm going through. And we know in peer support groups, the whole idea of empathy is what's happening when we're in a room, in a meeting, sharing things that we wouldn't normally share so that shame can dissipate. So remember that self-compassion and empathy are much more effective than keeping a secret and doubling down on your shame.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely true. And I have to say one of the things about the shame spiral, about getting sucked into this, is that it will take you down the wrong path, because like Hawkins said, once you're in that energetic state,
Hmm.
that's when the cravings start. That's when the bad people come out, because it's like they're attracted, these bad things, these things that aren't good for us. I don't even like to
Hmm.
use the word bad, because it's sometimes they're not good or bad. They're just not for us, right?
Right.
They come in to our lives because we're in that energetic state. We're
Yes. Yes.
trapped in there. So the world says, well, you identify with that. You must like that. Let us give you more of that. Right.
Right.
It's always trying to serve you. And that's what we get, and we
Hmm.
get trapped into the shame. This has been great, because I love the highlight on this. I know that you're having a pretty deep conversation with this on Recovered Life, right, Kristina?
I
I
sure
mean,
am.
you're having this. So if people want to join that conversation, they can.
It's beautiful too, because once again, it's very, very healing, and we heal together. So I've been, if you join the network, you can go ahead and put, addiction neuroscience, and you'll
Mhm.
find all of the chapters there, and you can get caught up.
Yeah, we have a ton of exclusive content on Recovered Life. If you go to recoveredlife.us, you can access it right there. You could join for free. There's a lot of conversations on this, as well as Recovered Life discussions, which we ask your opinion. You dive deep on it, and we
Yes.
have a discussion with you, and we'll tell you more about that. Now, when we come back, Kristina, we're going to have a really great episode, another other segment, because you and I are going to
Hmm.
reveal how we've dealt with shame and
Yes.
how we've dealt with this in our own recovery, and what haunts us, and how we got over it, or what we're still dealing with. So hold tight if you want to look under the hood here, guys. This is the episode for you, because Christine and I are going to talk about not clients, not what we're doing with clients, what we're doing with our own recovery. So it's going to be a great segment. It's going to come up after this quick break. Hey, before we go to the break, Christine, I wanted to mention something very, very important. That has to do with shame. You created a free 3-day challenge called Can't Say No. This thing is absolutely amazing. A lot of people, would you say that a lot of people that deal with shame,
Yes.
especially toxic shame, they might not know that they actually have a codependency issue?
Exactly. We're looking for to others to define us. That's what shame and perfectionism drive, and it's outward focused. This 3-day course allows you to have first language and little habits, that you can do every day to give yourself the room to actually take care of yourself and have time to look inward. On there, I also include an inventory process that will help you to discover the patterns that you have and the times that you've said yes when you really wanted to say no. When I was taught this skill, it changed my life. First time I said no, I thought I was going to die. But since then, I've learned that it is actually an acceptable answer.
Well, I have to tell you guys, this is just jam packed. It's 3 days. Plus, it is a special bonus gift that I will not reveal here. But you
Okay.
can get this 100% for free. And all you have to do is go to info.recoveredlife.us. Just click on the Can't Say No challenge. You'll just a couple steps. You're going to be right in watching those videos. That's info.recoveredlife.us. So, Christina, when we come back, we're gonna do a little
You can
tell
let
all
it
here, right?
go. Yep.
We're gonna let it go. We're gonna talk about shame in our own lives, and how we have dealt with this perfectionism and shame. All right, coming back. We'll see you in 15 seconds.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
Welcome back. Stay listening to the podcast or watching us, because we're going to have a lot of information. But before I do that, I want to remind everybody this is being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors and people like you. Continue to like, share, follow, and leave us a comment so that we can have a conversation. Also, visit info.recoveredlife.us. You can join the network where you can find those Recovered Life discussions and leave a donation that allows us to keep helping others. That's info.recoveredlife.us.
I have to tell you, Christina, I have to share with you before we dive into this segment, a conversation that I had with a buddy of mine who called me, who finally joined Recovered Life. And he, said, wow, he's like, the pandemic really messed up my connection with people
Yes.
in 12 step groups and with friends that I had that were also in recovery. And this has been a game changer for him. And, and it's so amazing. And he's like, and it's 100% free. He was like, are you sure? Like, I don't have to pay you for anything? Or he's like, because there's so much content on there, and he's loving it because, he can work it into his schedule, and it's got an
Yes.
app right on your phone, which is really cool. And it's like this private community. And so he's having conversations with people and connecting with people that he hasn't for years, literally for years. And he's like, I'm right in there. He's like, it's become a huge part of my recovery. So guys, if you haven't joined, go to recoveredlife.us and join. It's 100% for free. It's literally the best game in town, and it's
Right.
free. How do you beat it? How do you beat it?
I don't think you do. It's, dare I say, perfect? No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
We aren't going to
it's
say
become
that.
a huge part of our lives. I mean, look,
Yes.
you and I are always posting on there. We're having Recovered Life conversations. So all the conversations go either from, our lives or from Clubhouse right onto the Recovered Life app. And it's great because we can continue on these conversations. I even like it better than 12-step fellowships because at the end of the fellowship, that was it.
Yes.
But I'm still having conversations that were very interesting to me a month ago, that started a month
Yes.
ago.
Yes. Absolutely. And for me, it's been awesome to meet people all over the world, and realize how much we all share, both in our troubles and our victories. We've
Yep.
talked about it before, that I didn't know that there was a life outside of alcoholism. And this has been one of the, back then it was Alcoholics Anonymous, but seeing these options show up and blow up, it really does end isolation.
It's absolutely crazy. It's a brand new recovery world. We want you to be a part of it. So go to recoveredlife.us and join for free. Hey, we're diving into it here. We're going to get real. We're talking about how do we deal with perfectionism and recovery in this second segment, Christina, because many people say, hey, what I like about the live show is when you guys talk about your own recovery in your own life,
Right.
and then also how you've dealt with clients to get them from point A to point Z, right?
Right.
So let's dive into it. I know you have no perfectionism issues at all, and that pretty much you just flowed through life looking great and got the good
Yes.
Orange County life, and pretty much
Yes.
everything is perfect. So you don't have any perfectionism.
Oh, that's funny to even think about. I've shared many times on the show, my origin story starts with shame from the beginning. My mother became pregnant out of wedlock, and in 1969, with our super hyper religious family, she carried a lot of shame. And what I have discovered with research, once my son was diagnosed, looking at anxiety, looking at the genetic compound, what we're learning now is that we know that we carry shame and trauma from seven generations back. They've been able to clear that. So didn't know all of that when I was putting alcohol down, didn't know that shame was what was driving me. But eventually I had to concede to myself that truly in the deepest part of me, I didn't believe that I should even be here based on that history. I didn't believe that I should be alive. And if I am alive, then I better work until my fingers are bloody. I better look good doing it. I better make sure that I always remember your birthday. I always remember what you want. My codependency was a 5-alarm fire in my life when I got sober. It was what I was treating with alcohol. And it took me a couple of years after, my brain kind of came back online, and I started to realize that it was a safe environment for me to start working on this. So
Yeah. It's, you know what? And perfection of this whole idea, it's like, I'm never going to get it wrong.
right.
It's, I've got to outwork everybody else, which is a myth, by the way, working hard to
Mhm.
become successful. No, I do believe you have to work hard. I do. I'm
Of
one of those
course.
people that believe that you got to put in the effort, right? But this whole, like, I constantly have to work hard, even though I've done the work. And this is this codependency thing that you talk about all the time, Christiane, this codependency thing. I love how I said that. You know, what's great about this is because I realized that even after I was working hard, and we've talked a lot about how crazy this is. I look now is that I had to work hard for other people, that they needed to take it, even if they were working for, no, I'll do the heavy lifting always.
Right. That
is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Even if I'm paying for it, somebody to do the heavy lifting, I still feel like I've got to I got to do the heavy lifting and all this stuff. It's crazy thinking. And this perfectionism leads right into this, is that no one can do it better than I can. Wow.
Sure.
Killer, right?
Well, and perfectionism is, something that we're all going to lose at, regardless. First of all, who gets to decide what's perfect anyway? But and I knew this on a logical standpoint. I would say the last 15 years, I really understood that there is no perfection. Now, being able to heal it and kind of look through where it actually started took a little more effort. And I would even beat myself up for knowing that nobody's perfect, but being compelled and driven to continue to try to do it. And I felt like,
absolutely.
Go ahead. I want to hear.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say that absolutely. It's like, what happens is that you, like, I know for me, I really feel a lot of the times it's like, well, I have to get it right before I do it. And I've learned, look, I'm an entrepreneur, and the people who know me that listen to this, I'm an entrepreneur. I've had several businesses. I'm involved in a lot of stuff. And the thing is that when I look back, and I did this last night, I was in the car waiting to pick up my daughter, and I was thinking about everything that I had to do. And ultimately we'll go, well, I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I didn't do that, as opposed to looking at what I did execute. And I'll just tell you this one big thing that I've learned in business through business coaching, and then into my recovery, goes into my recovery business too, or just recovery practice, is that it's all about execution. Yes. It's not about thinking. You don't have to be smart to have long-term recovery. Matter of fact, I think it's better if you're not smart. So if you're sitting there listening to say like, oh, I'm super educated, I'm like, well, that means that you're an overthinker. Right. And you're probably going to have a problem.
Right. And, what I believe is, and they say this in the big book about fear being the number one offender. And, my nervous system and my belief system were built on things that I made a decision about when I was 2 years old or 3 years old. And in my 20s, that thought process, that belief system was killing me. And so, you take care of the first thing first, you put down the substance. But I had to start saying, wow, I'm making decisions on a, outdated, no way to get it kind of basis. I'm thinking that my life is supposed to look like it is in the movies, that I'm supposed to be perfect at something the first time I try. And part of it was that I did succeed in a lot of things, but my spiritual maturity wasn't strong enough in the beginning to realize that I have to be right-sized and I have to be able to handle disappointments and try again. We talked about hopelessness last week, and hope is not a feeling. It's a cognitive process. So as I started learning this, I realized I did have it within me to change the rules, which is,
well, I think that's the key, is that you do have to change the rules, because the way that I have noticed that perfectionism really seeps into my life is overthinking. And this, for me, I made a statement, it was 5 years ago, I believe I made the statement that I was going to stop thinking for most of the time and just execute. That's when I look back at my life really taking off, and huge areas where I've had really huge, big things, it's like I stopped thinking. And I actually got to the point where I stopped thinking so much. Now, when I say stop thinking, I'm thinking, obviously, I've got to think in my job and what I do, but I stopped pondering and ruminating and overthinking and strategizing and what does this mean and all those. I just dumped all of that, and I had 1 hour a week where I would smoke a cigar in my backyard. I would think for an hour, 2 hours. That was it. I'd write it all down on a notepad, and I'd say, that's it. I close the notepad. That's it for me with my strategic thinking for the week about how I can improve my life. I already know what I need to do to improve my life. I don't need to think about it 24 hours a day.
Exactly. We do know how. And the things, for me, it was a hypervigilance of always pondering and worrying about what could happen, all of the scenarios. That was a survival skill that saved my life growing up. But it had outstayed its welcome in my life because I was wasting and feeling and going through all of the trauma over and over again, like somehow I would forget it, watching to see what can I control, what can I do, and just being able to take that rest. I love that you said that you made a decision not to think anymore, because for me, one of the bases of my recovery was understanding that I can't have really two thoughts at one time, and that I have agency over my thinking. And so rather than denial, which is I'm not going to look at it at all, I could make a choice every day, every hour. I could double down and say, this is what I'm going to think about right now. I have the choice. That is interesting. I'm sure it'll come up again whenever I need to deal with it. But right now I have to, they have this saying in Al-Anon, pray and do the dishes. And that has been my life for so many years, that sometimes now it feels foreign to worry about it, to worry about the future.
So you got that is, the strategy. And I do believe that this is an ACOA thing, that if you come from dysfunction, or you come from an alcoholic thing, your mind is geared from a very early on about what can go wrong. And, I had somebody that was working with me. He's like, I don't know why that I'm always thinking about what can go wrong and strategize. And I'm like, well, because you come from a place where things did go wrong. And when they went wrong, there were huge consequences. So the thing is that your mind, it's a survival mechanism, like you said. But I think one of the big things is to understand that it is a mechanism, and that what you can do is you can simply just make a choice. Just make a choice. Hey, I don't want this anymore. Like I'm aware of it, and I'm going to start working to let go of that.
Well, when we know 5% of our thoughts, the human brain has 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day. 5% of them are new. So we know that if we've thought about it, we've probably thought about it for years. And making a plan to focus on something that is positive. Our brains are set up, like you said, for safety. Negative bias. That's exactly what happens in everybody's brain, whether you are in recovery or not. And so stopping that pattern and saying, nope, today I'm going to focus on what went right, because I want more of that. And it really, really does work.
That's it. Call into what you want in your life, as opposed to sitting and obsessing about what isn't working or what you believe isn't working. And this is the big takeaway for me. I know that I spent a lot of time thinking about and ruminating and having anxiety over what wasn't perfect, Kristina.
Yes.
And in the reality, that too was a judgment call, because later on I did make the right call. It was as perfect as it could be in that moment. And perfect is overrated, in my opinion. I think it's the doing of it. And like, if that's the one thing that I was going to leave with everybody, is like what I got out of my battle with perfectionism. It's just do something, execute as much as you can in life. Don't sit and think about it. So you don't need so much thought around it.
No, the elusive will of God. When somebody says, how do I know if I'm in God's will? I say, well, you try something. When you get that stop sign or that 2x4 to your head, you realize, oh, that's not God's will. I'll go the other way. There's no magic to it.
Absolutely. This has been a really great episode. Perfectionism. We dove into it. We're going to have more discussion around this in Recovered Life discussions, which happen on Clubhouse. You can access all those at recoveredlife.us. Kristina, any final thoughts about perfectionism here as we wrap up episode 97?
Yes. The cure is to start with self-compassion and understand whether you are just realizing that perfectionism has been very detrimental to you, to start with self-compassion and realize that we all suffer from shame.
Yeah, absolutely. Cut yourself a break, guys. Final thought, cut yourself a break. There's a lot of really great things in your life. Episode 97, Wednesday, April 13th, 2022 episode in the can. We'll see you guys on Friday. Have a really great rest of your week.
Bye.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.